Mom, you never received the $100,000 I sent, did you? My daughter Rachel asked it the way you'd ask if someone got a text message, casual, almost distracted, her fork still hovering over a slice of turkey. But the words landed in that dining room like a dropped plate. I set down my water glass slowly. What $100,000, honey? Rachel's eyebrows pulled together. The wire transfer. In March. For the roof and the medical bills, Mom. Marcus set the whole thing up himself, said he confirmed it went through. I looked down the table at my son-in-law, Marcus Cole, who was suddenly very interested in cutting his green beans into smaller and smaller pieces. My roof still leaked in the corner of the guest bedroom. My medical bills, the ones from my hip surgery in February, were still sitting in a folder on my kitchen counter, half of them in collections. Marcus, Rachel said, her voice tightening. Tell her. You showed me the confirmation. He looked up, and for just a second, something flickered behind his easy, golf course smile. There must have been a routing issue, he said smoothly. Banks mess these things up more than people think. I have lived 66 years, raised a daughter who built an empire out of nothing but grit and good instincts, and buried a husband who taught me exactly what an honest man's voice sounds like. Marcus's voice, in that moment, did not sound like an honest man's voice. If a moment like that has ever happened to you, a number, a name, a silence that told you more than the words did, drop the city you're watching from in the comments. And if this story pulls you the way it pulled me, hit like. It helps stories like mine find the people who need them. Let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Diane Hensley. I'm 66 years old, and I live in the same modest brick house in Millbrook where I raised Rachel after her father, my husband Tom, passed away from a stroke 14 years ago. I never remarried. I filled the years with my garden, a part-time job at the library that I only gave up 2 years ago, and Sunday calls with my daughter, who by then had turned a small skincare line she started in her college dorm into Hensley & Vale, a company now valued somewhere north of $40 million. I was never the kind of mother who asked her successful daughter for anything. When Rachel married Marcus 6 years ago, charming, well-dressed, always with some new investment idea on his lips, I welcomed him the way I would have welcomed anyone Rachel loved. He worked in wealth management, he told me at their engagement dinner, and not long after the wedding, he began quietly taking over more and more of the family's financial arrangements, including, eventually, the money Rachel wanted to send my way. It started innocently enough. Rachel would call and say, Mom, let Marcus handle the transfers, he's good with this stuff, it'll save you the paperwork. I trusted her judgment. I trusted the love in her voice when she talked about taking care of me. And for a while, small amounts did arrive, a few $100s here, a bit more around the holidays, enough to make the arrangement feel real. But this last March, after my hip surgery left me with medical bills stacking up and a roof that had started dripping into a bucket every time it rained, Rachel told me she was wiring $100,000 directly, enough to clear the bills and fix the roof and leave a cushion besides. She said Marcus was setting it up personally, since he handled the family's larger transfers through his firm. I never saw a cent of it. Not $1 landed in my account. And for 8 months, I told myself it must be moving through some slow channel, some tax structure Marcus understood and I didn't. I patched the roof with a tarp myself. I set up a payment plan with the hospital billing office and paid what I could, month by month, out of my modest pension. I never once imagined my own daughter's love for me was being quietly rerouted by the man she trusted most. There's something else I should mention, because it matters for what comes later. About 3 years ago, when Hensley & Vale was going through a rough patch after a manufacturing contract fell through, I quietly sent Rachel $12,000 from my own savings, everything I'd set aside for a rainy day, without a second thought. She paid it back within a year, with interest I never asked for, and told me more than once that it had helped her make payroll during the hardest stretch the company ever faced. I mention this not to make myself sound generous, but because it tells you something about the relationship Rachel and I actually had. There was real trust between us, tested in both directions, built over decades. That's exactly why what happened later cut as deep as it did. It wasn't a stranger who took advantage of me. It was someone standing inside a circle of trust one had spent a lifetime building with my daughter. Looking back now, There were small moments in the months before that first Thanksgiving that I brushed past too easily. Marcus had mentioned, almost offhandedly at a family barbecue, that he'd set up a new holding structure for some of our bigger family transfers, better for the tax picture. I remember nodding along, thinking how sensible that sounded, how lucky Rachel was to have married someone who understood finance so well. I had no idea I was listening to a confession dressed up as small talk. If you've ever trusted someone in your family with something important, only to feel that instinct in your stomach telling you something wasn't right, tell me below what tipped you off first. Mine came at a dinner table, in front of a turkey neither of us finished eating. The morning after Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never drank and pulled out an old spiral notebook, the same kind I used to jot grocery lists in. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote 2 words, "Find the wire." I called my bank first, the small community branch where I'd kept my account for over 20 years. A young teller named Priya pulled up my history while I waited on hold, and after a few minutes came back with an answer I already feared. "Mrs. Hensley, I don't see any incoming wire transfer close to that amount, not this year, not ever. The largest deposit on your account in the past 12 months was $310, in April." I thanked her, hung up, and sat with that silence for a long moment. Then I called Rachel's office, not Rachel herself, but the finance department at Hensley and Vale, where I still had an old contact from years back, a woman named Carla who used to babysit for Rachel as a teenager and had grown into the company's senior controller. "Mrs. Hensley," Carla said carefully, once I explained what I was asking. "I can tell you the company processed an outgoing wire in March for exactly that amount, coded as a personal family transfer, authorized under Marcus Cole's signature. But it wasn't routed to any account under your name. It went to an account titled Cole Family Holdings LLC. Cole Family Holdings. Not Hensley. Not Rachel and Marcus jointly. Just Marcus, dressed up in a name that sounded like it belonged to me." I didn't feel angry sitting there in my kitchen. I felt something colder and far more useful. I was awake, in a way I hadn't let myself be in months. I called the hospital billing office next, half hoping there had been some record of a large payment I'd simply forgotten. The billing coordinator, a patient woman named Sandra, pulled up my account and confirmed what I already knew in my bones. Every payment on record was mine, made in small monthly installments straight out of my pension, going back to April. Nothing large had ever cleared. Nothing from a wire, nothing from an LLC, nothing at all beyond the modest checks I'd been writing myself every month while quietly assuming relief was somewhere on its way. That evening, I began writing everything down, every phone call, every excuse Marcus had ever given about processing delays and routing issues, every date I could remember. Numbers don't lie, even when people do, and I intended to build a record complete enough that no smooth voice could talk its way around it. If you were in my kitchen that morning, would you have called Rachel immediately, or built the proof first the way I did? Tell me in the comments, I want to know how far you'd have gone before saying a word. A retired friend of my late husband's, a former bank examiner named Walter Grimes, had helped me once before with a confusing insurance claim, and I called him next. He listened to everything without interrupting, the way careful people do, and agreed to help me look deeper. Within a week, Walter had traced the public filing for Cole Family Holdings LLC. It had been registered 11 months earlier, just weeks before Rachel first mentioned the $100,000. The sole managing member listed was Marcus Cole. Not Rachel. Not me. Marcus, alone. Walter also found something that made my stomach drop even further, a second filing, from 8 months ago, showing the LLC had taken out a business line of credit, using the wired $100,000 as collateral, and had drawn most of it down already. Money that was supposed to fix my roof and pay my hospital bills had instead gone toward what the filing vaguely called investment property acquisition and operating capital. "Diane," Walter said gently, over coffee at my kitchen table a few days later, "this isn't a routing error. This is a man who built a private structure to intercept money his wife believed was going to her mother." I thought about every phone call over the past 8 months where Marcus had smoothly explained away my silence about the money. The bank's back-end systems can be slow with large transfers. There's a compliance hold on big family wires this time of year. Don't worry, Diane, it'll clear. Each excuse alone had sounded reasonable. Strung together across 8 months, they told a very different story. I also thought about something Rachel had mentioned once, almost in passing, months earlier, that Marcus had been stressed about a property deal that needed more capital than expected. At the time I'd assumed it was normal business talk. Now I understood I had been listening to the sound of my own money disappearing, dressed up as small talk at a family dinner. Walter went a step further and pulled the county property records tied to the LLC's line of credit. 2 parcels of undeveloped land near a planned highway interchange, purchased within weeks of the wire clearing, both titled to Cole Family Holdings alone. Land Marcus was clearly betting would triple in value once the interchange broke ground, land purchased with money that was supposed to fix a leaking roof and pay down a stack of hospital bills. "Diane," Walter said gently, over coffee at my kitchen table a few days later, "this isn't a routing error. This is a man who built a private structure to intercept money his wife believed was going to her mother, and used it to make himself richer while you patched your roof with a tarp." If you're still with me, comment still here so I know this story is landing. Because what came next was the moment I decided Rachel needed to see the truth with her own eyes, not just hear it from me over the phone. I didn't want to hand Rachel a stack of papers over the phone. I wanted her to see it the way I had, piece by piece, in a room where Marcus couldn't smooth it over with a golf course smile. So I invited them both back for a second dinner 2 weeks later, telling Rachel I wanted to properly celebrate now that the holiday chaos had settled. Roast chicken, the kind Rachel used to beg for as a girl, a pie cooling on the windowsill. I spent the days before that dinner going over everything with Walter one more time, making sure every date lined up, every document was in order, every number matched the one before it. He reminded me, more than once, that the goal wasn't to win an argument at the table. The goal was to make it impossible for Marcus to talk his way out of what the paper already proved. Over dinner, I steered the conversation gently. "I finally called the hospital about those bills," I said, keeping my tone light. "I told them the funds were on their way." Marcus's fork paused for just a fraction of a second. "I'm sure it'll clear any day now," he said smoothly. "These large transfers can take time to settle." "Funny," I said. "The bank told me there's never been a wire that large hit my account at all. Not once, not ever." Rachel set down her glass. "Marcus, I thought you said it cleared months ago." "It did," he said, a beat too quickly. "There must be some confusion with the account number on their end." "With an account I've had for 20 years? I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Or with an LLC registered in your name alone, 11 months ago, right before you told Rachel the transfer was ready?" The table went silent in a way that felt different from the first Thanksgiving. That time, the silence had been confused. This time, it had weight. Rachel turned to look at her husband, and I watched something in her face go very still. "What LLC?" she said. It wasn't really a question anymore. I reached into the drawer beside my chair and pulled out a plain folder. I'd practiced this moment more times than I want to admit. "I think it's time we looked at this together," I said, and I slid it across the table toward my daughter. "If you'd been sitting where I was, would you have laid it all out that second dinner, or waited even longer? Tell me below, I want to know how patient you'd have been." Rachel opened the folder slowly. On top sat the printed LLC filing, Cole Family Holdings, managing member Marcus Cole, registered 11 months earlier. Beneath that, the wire confirmation from the company's own finance department, showing the $100,000 leaving Hensley and Vale's account and landing in the LLC, not in mine. Beneath that, the line of credit filing, showing the money drawn down within weeks for something called investment property acquisition. I watched my daughter's face move through disbelief, then something much harder. "This isn't what it looks like," Marcus said quickly. "I was going to move it to your mother's account once the property deal closed, Rachel, I swear. I just needed the collateral in the short term, it was always going to come back around." "For 8 months, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, while I paid a hospital bill out of my pension and covered my roof with a tarp." "You told me it cleared," Rachel said, her voice rising now, no longer steady at all. "You showed me a screenshot, Marcus. A confirmation number. I sat in your car and watched you send it." "It was a draft," he said, grasping now. "A pending confirmation, it wasn't final yet, I just—" "Stop," Rachel said, and something in her voice made even Marcus go quiet. "Stop talking. Rachel didn't say anything else for a long moment. She just stared at the papers spread across my small kitchen table, the same table where she'd done her homework as a girl, where I'd helped her fill out her first business plan for a skincare line that would one day be worth more than either of us could have imagined. "Get out," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I need you to leave, Marcus. Now." He left without another word. Rachel sat across from me, tears finally falling, and said, "Mom, I trusted him with the one thing I actually wanted to give you myself." "No, sweetheart," I told her, reaching for her hand the way I had when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. "The mistake was never trusting. The mistake belongs to the one who broke it." Rachel's company attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya Kapoor, reviewed everything within days and didn't hesitate. The evidence was clean: a documented wire transfer, a shell LLC registered solely in Marcus's name just weeks before the transfer occurred, and a line of credit drawn against funds that were never his to use as collateral. Marcus's own attorney tried arguing the transfer had been informal seed capital for a joint family investment, a claim that fell apart the moment Priya produced the LLC's own operating agreement, listing Marcus as the sole member with sole authority over funds, no mention of Rachel or me anywhere in the filing. He tried one more angle before the ruling came down, suggesting that at 66, I might simply have misunderstood the timeline of a complex family transaction, the same tired suggestion I'd heard whispered at me in other forms for years, the idea that an older woman's confusion is the simplest explanation for anything inconvenient. Priya didn't even raise her voice. "Your Honor," she said, "Mrs. Hensley documented every phone call, every excuse, and every discrepancy across 8 months, cross-referenced against a public LLC filing registered weeks before the transfer, a line of credit drawn against funds that were never his, and 2 land purchases made with money his mother-in-law never received a cent of." If this is confusion, it is the most precisely documented confusion this court has ever encountered. The court's ruling came down clean: full repayment of the diverted funds plus interest, immediate dissolution of Cole Family Holdings LLC, forced liquidation of the 2 land parcels with proceeds directed toward repayment, and a formal finding of financial exploitation of an elderly family member, which would follow Marcus through any future licensing in financial services. I didn't feel triumphant walking out of that courthouse. I felt something quieter, the particular peace of a woman who had simply insisted the truth be told, even when it would have been easier to let it slide. Once the repayment cleared, I finally fixed my roof properly, cleared every last hospital bill, and sat down with Rachel and Walter to talk about what to do with what remained. We started something small, a free financial literacy clinic at the Millbrook Senior Center, helping older adults understand exactly where their money goes before it disappears into someone else's account instead of after. We named it the Hensley Family Fund, and Rachel funds it quietly every year, no fanfare, no press release. Rachel comes by most Sundays now, the way she used to before the company got so big and life got so busy. We sit at the same kitchen table where this all unraveled, and sometimes she brings a stack of blank incorporation documents from work, just so we can go through them together line by line, the way neither of us thought to do before. She's slower to hand her trust to smooth voices these days, and I think, in a strange way, that's made her a sharper businesswoman than she ever was before. The divorce finalized quietly a few months later. Rachel didn't fight for a big settlement or a public spectacle. She simply wanted her name and mine permanently separated from anything Marcus Cole ever touched again. I think that told me more about who my daughter really is than any dollar amount ever could. If you've ever had someone in your own family quietly reroute the truth while smiling right at you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you believe, like I do, that the truth always finds its way home eventually, hit like, subscribe, and stay close. Next time, I'll tell you about another mother who almost lost everything to someone smiling right across her own dinner table.